Meanwhile, in the city, life continued and everything was quiet. The girl was walking down the street and catching glances of people passing by, who turned around and watched her beauty. She realized that this day was the worst day of her life. And immediately afterwards, she remembered that it looked like Kebab had already finished eating now. I wish I hadn't spoiled anything. She had such thoughts and looked at her phone. I cannot let my guard down. I oughta bring Kababo over here and move the soul arc somewhere safe. Time to work for a living. Kababo, come over to this realm now. These were the thoughts in her head. Then she turned on her phone and ordered Soul Arc Unleash. She summons Kabbalah. Then she clicked on it and an image of a girl appeared. She couldn't figure out why this photo was on the loading screen. Could it be a mistake of some kind? She was panicked and worried if she could handle it on her own. She started to press the button with her fingers, but was frightened by the fact that the phone did not recognize fingerprints in any way. After that, the realization of how it happened came to her. After all, first she rushed after the child. Then she fell to the ground, helped by a guy who had the exact same device, which they had accidentally swapped without realizing it themselves. When the girl realized the seriousness of the situation, she panicked and started biting her lips when she realized that it was that guy's phone. What was the world coming to? After that, she got up abruptly and started running in the opposite direction, because she just wanted to catch him without wasting much effort. He just wouldn't get away with it. Two of us. In the meantime, the same guy was running near the high-rise, who this time was already trying to get away from the place quickly, so that the sneaker shopper wouldn't discover anything and get hit in the head for it. Tired from his run, he stopped to rest, because he no longer had the strength to run. He looked away and said no hard feelings. It was just business. So just now he blocked this guy before he knew it. Taking his phone in his hands, he didn't understand what was going on. Suddenly his phone began to glow and emit an unusual bright glow that dazzled everything around him. It was not hard to guess that it really scared the young guy who could not understand what was going on. The loading screen came on, which already showed him that the process was almost complete, and something unknown was approaching. His face was very frightened. The phone literally began to burn in his hands. It was very scary to watch this process. Suddenly, some unknown purple glare formed and an electrical explosion that threw the guy a few meters away in a blast wave. As he flew away, he started screaming and didn't understand why a reflection of the village was appearing in one of the purple circles. What was that all about anyway? At that moment, the blue blast wave came into contact with the purple blast wave and began to merge with each other, forming a portal that led to an incomprehensible magical city. The guy looked and couldn't believe that these portals were actually getting bigger. As he stood there, in a few minutes, 4 completely different portals formed around him, leading to separate cities or linking to each other. You couldn't tell for sure yet, but it looked like the guy started to get sucked into this portal and even started to glow. And then, after a minute, the system still teleported him to a new city. He was puzzled, but now that it had happened, he had to reconnoiter. He didn't know what had happened, but it really was some kind of, it's annoying, per se. I told you to stay put. At this moment, another spectator was watching him and marveling at his movements. It really could not leave the connoisseurs of dance unconcerned. He was completely oblivious to the fact that he was being spoken to by a girl whose words he was letting slip past his ears. She turned around and looked up with her pretty eyes, saying that if he was already here, let him have a piece too. She was also very pretty. After she also saw a guy who was really into her, which also made her very pleasantly surprised. But then she realized that he really wasn't Scarlet. Without giving the guy a word, she turned around and continued eating, adding that she thought you were someone else. At this point she was frightened though, because how did he get here, and who was he anyway? At least let him introduce himself. He said hello at once, saying his name was Torin Kim. But the girl wouldn't even listen to him, and said it, Kunlun Spy, throwing a sharp object at him. The guy couldn't have expected such a reaction, so he got hit right in the head. But the girl didn't care. She was doing it all in the name of justice, after which a huge key began to glow near her hand, which blinded everything around it and had magical power. She held it up high and said she would not forgive it and would vanquish you. After that, the key started its transformation and got very big, activating the public execution mode. The girl looked very intimidating with those sticks, which were several times her own size, but nevertheless, she was still ready to fight. But it was not needed, because Torin Kim just continued to lie on the floor and did not move as he received a blow that can be compared to a hit by an arrow from a bow. After a while, there was some more action, after which the guy was already eating the same kebab that flew into him. The girl became suddenly very polite and started apologizing for mistaking the guy for a spy. So, as an apology, she offered him a taste of this nutritious kebab. And Torin didn't mind either, so he immediately agreed, clarifying whether he could really eat it. After which he began to eat absolutely all the dishes that were on this table, and the girl stepped aside and suspiciously began to click something on the phone. She looked into her reflection and was really pleased that he was so naive. This may appear to be just a phone, but it is undoubtedly the relic Soul Arc. This should be in Scarlett's hands. What happened? She looked at the guy again and said that in any case, some malfunction must have allowed him to log in and travel to the net sphere. All I gotta do now is delete his records and reset everything back to normal. The girl became very happy and started smiling, clicking and looking at the complex holograms on her phone. She tried to send the guy to the trash, and smiling, and also clicking on the hologram with his picture. She said, and just like that, we are good to go. But the message from the system surprised her very much, because access is denied, which she could not understand. Error after error kept popping up, which made her uncomfortable and, let's face it, a little panicky, because it can't be. There's no way she can remove this. Something must have disturbed the order of causality, per se. Looking toward the guy, she added that this will messier the longer he stays here, per se. The girl walked up to him and ordered him to leave, saying it was time. She will treat him to even more kebab skewers next time, per se. She then handed him the phone that had fallen out during his fall. He stood up and said absolutely nothing to her, because he didn't understand what was going on, and the girl just wanted to send him back right away. After activating the magic spell, the girl said that it would not be an easy day for him, but absolutely no need to worry. The mighty Fave will catch up with him after finishing up here. After that, the portal opened again, from which the guy came into this world, and then there was a bright purple flash that blinded everything around it and began to attract objects and the guy to itself. He was scared, but the girl told him it was a dimension portal, and he couldn't even understand what it was. That is actually a thing? That is incredible. The girl then went up to the guy and told him that these were just side effects of the measurement portals. They could include hair loss and infertility, but she asked the guy not to worry. He was really quite shocked by this, because he certainly didn't expect to hear this. But the girl also added, saying that she takes absolutely full responsibility if these symptoms are fatal. So she patted him on the shoulder again and smiled very sweetly. The guy was starting to get really expensive, asking could he really become a eunuch from that? That's why he needs to think about this decision first. He was really very scared after all. No one would want that to happen to him. But the girl asked him not to worry so much because she completely covered him, and Huyan would be right behind him. It was really very intense, and he turned to the girl to ask him, isn't there absolutely no other solution? But something completely went wrong, because the girl had already started to untwist and wanted to kick the guy with all her might. He stopped once more to ask what was going on, but the girl was already serious and proceeded to kick the guy, after which he went flying straight into the portal that she had created. After that, she really became very sweet and charming, saying that there was absolutely nothing to worry about, and she would take care of him for the rest of his life. But the guy was really pissed off and didn't understand why he had to, because the girl had just robbed his hair and testicles. He would be very unhappy without it. But strange girl just started waving her hands and saying goodbye to the guy, asking him to wait on the other side. And also, if he had any questions or problems, he could call her and ask for help. But the guy was already flying very, very far away. This whole world and the day he decided to sell those sneakers. The portal has now completely closed, bringing the guy back to the very same megapolis. But after seeing him fall from a skyscraper, he continues to scream and panic, because it really does look like he's going to die. Have you ever seen a man fall from a skyscraper and calmly survive? Neither have I. The moment the guy flies, he still doesn't realize what just happened. It's just some kind of curse. Eunuch or not, he's in a free fall now and is really about to fall to the sidewalk. He was really cursing this girl in the moment he met her. But as he was approaching the ground, he realized that this was definitely not how he wanted to die. At that moment, he took his phone again and squeezed it very tightly, after which it lit up and lit up brightly. There seemed to be some kind of flash, and out of the spark, that would give him something new now. And indeed it did. There was a click, and the guy started glowing as well and probably teleported somewhere again. The popular girl and the guy with the blue hair became very wary. They seemed to sense that something unusual and strange was happening right now. And then behind the wheel of his brand new Porsche, he shouted sharply, "There it is!" The sneaker buyer was sitting in his house enjoying his purchase when he suddenly picked up the sneaker and found that it was just a low-quality shoe that could have been thrown in the trash. He immediately closed his eyes, after which he clenched his fist very hard, saying that after such an act, Torin would be dead. His eyes began to glow with hatred, and there was a slight smile on his face. At that moment, in the sky flew the same guy who kept clutching his phone in his hands. He looked brave enough, even though he was very scared and hated the whole world for it. And so, his distance between the ground was at 20 meters. He started sticking out his hand, trying to somehow smooth out the fall on which he landed. His body hung in the air, and his legs, which had very nice sneakers on, spread apart. And in the position of a professional street dancer, he landed on the ground, which surprised pedestrians, who looked at him and were very surprised. It was really hard, almost unreal, to believe that. Where else had you seen something like that? At this point, another spectator watched him and marveled at his movements. It really couldn't leave the dance connoisseurs unconcerned. In his gaze, he had completely forgotten that he was being addressed by a girl whose words he was letting slip past his ears. You're the one who begged me to go out with you." She was embarrassed, wondering if he was making fun of her. This amount of attention made Torin very embarrassed and did not continue to part with his phone in his hands. "You know what? Maybe it's my fault. I'm sorry, okay? What are you even sorry for? Do you even know?" He was perplexed by the question, for he had not expected such a thing, when suddenly something distracted him again. The guy's phone kept glowing a very bright blue glow, and he wouldn't let go of it. The black guy was very surprised as he realized it was Solark. The girl kept distracting him as the guy didn't want to listen to her at all, so she suggested they just break up, which he gladly agreed to. She couldn't believe it, because was he really serious? But he wasn't joking. The girl did not expect such a reaction from him, so she wanted to clarify. "Are you sure you are not going to regret? Get it over with it already. Just walk away, baby." He became very aggressive and buffalo-like. His eyes began to glow orange, and he was several times bigger than her. "She deafs?" He told her to get lost. His face was unrecognizable. He really looked like a bull, and his veins had turned green. The girl was crying, watching all this, because she also did not understand what was happening to him at the moment when he began to transform and increase in size. In an instant, the flash around him began to shine with green light absolutely everywhere. Everyone was shocked by this turn of events. No one could believe it. The blast wave threw away dozens of meters more people who were nearby. But that's not all. It also hit the cars that were moving along the road. In one of them sat a guy with blue hair who couldn't understand why his motor had died. He was perplexed. Absolutely all city traffic stopped, every driver complaining that their engines were broken, and no one had even guessed what was going on yet. The girl fell to the floor and saw some kind of large metal leg that looked like the hoof of a bull. It turned out to be true, and she wasn't imagining it. Her boyfriend had just turned into a real bull. He started screaming and waving his arms. I got carried away and blew my cover. But nevertheless, it's finally time to wild out. Meanwhile, evil bull lifting into the air a small and fragile girl who used to date him for quite some time, back when the bull was a simple guy and had not transformed into an evil animal. It was obvious that she was really very scared, especially when he addressed her in a very strict and disrespectful way. The floor is not clean. Dawn, spoil your shirt, girl. I hate this. She just listened to him silently and tried not to make any unnecessary movements to stay in one piece and not get hurt. He then put her on the ground, saying that it was over between them now, so it was time to say goodbye. He continued his rude remarks in her direction, even though the girl tried one more time to calm him down. She cried and said that she had always known he was a bad guy, but she couldn't even imagine that he was actually an evil monster. After that, she couldn't think of anything better to do than to take out her phone and take selfies with it to post on social media. He didn't like that very much. Torin watched what was happening and also did not understand what such an interesting and eventful day was like. First, he was almost killed, and now a bull, several times his size, appears before his eyes and runs toward the girl to take her phone. The bull became very aggressive and started growling, ordering the guy to stop in his seat and not move. This made him very frightened, for he had never been threatened by an animal before, so he decided to ask if the complaint was really in his direction. But the monster pointed at him and said, "Who else, doofus? Stay right there with that thing in your hand. Do you know what I'm saying?" This made the boy very frightened and unsure of what to do. The only thing he could shout out was that he still wasn't sure if the monster was talking to him. The bull became even more aggressive and ran in his direction, ordering the guy not to be so bold and to throw the phone to the ground immediately. People were also shocked and no one understood what was going on. Some of them even assumed that a movie was going on right now. Even motorists stopped on the roads because they were shocked that no one even reported that the shooting will take place in Tehran Road, which is some serious special. But people didn't care. In any case, they wanted to record this moment in order to put it on Instagram. Bull doesn't like it very much, so he shouted again, saying that he ordered him to stop with the shooting. Okay, none of them want to listen? Then he would teach them proper manners. After unlocking the phone, he leveled up and started filming all the people on the camera in the same way, or so it would seem at first glance. Because in fact there was a clack. The phone opened and all the devices nearby began to shock, as well as a shockwave formed. All the devices that were nearby were destroyed, including the video cameras and alarm systems. The city's security system also malfunctioned, and all equipment was destroyed and disabled. The chief ordered to check all possible connections, but absolutely everything went down. One of them ordered a pizza at all and will now be left without an order. People took out their phones and were absolutely unable to call anyone or access social media. But the bull stood his ground and was unstoppable. He continued to activate the hologram and said that he hadn't planned for it to go this far. Torin watched the situation and did not understand how he took out all the devices. Bull continued his remarks as he was already the local star that everyone listened to. He asked people to look at what they made him do, and then he turned the magical hologram into his sword-like weapon. He also kept whispering the phrases, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." Then he swung and struck the ground with his weapon. It was the boom bap hammer, with which he could smash absolutely anything in his path. It was time to take a few more blows. Jumping up, he said he wanted to set the tone for you with this fresh new single. He swung properly and rose into the air, looking very intimidating, and then immediately struck the ground with his hammer, creating a large ball of dust. Moreover, The ground underfoot also began to crack, which people could not expect and were very frightened. So the bull came up to them and said that this definitely was not a movie and proceeded to scare them. Everyone was shocked by what he had done and scattered around. His eyes began to burn yellow. He felt like the king of this world, ordering the guy next to him to come hither. He was already beside him and told him to give him what was in his hands. People saw what was happening and began to panic, and Torin was no exception. He pulled out his phone and asked what was going on anyway. First he was in free fall and almost died, and now this gangsta cow is attacking him as well? He immediately remembered the words of the girl who had informed him before she left that it would not be an easy day for him. But what did she mean by that? That cow's really having at it. If I get mixed up in this, I might actually die. It worried him a lot and made him think. He stepped with his foot and realized that the first thing he needed to do was to get away from this place as quickly as possible. He also began to worry why there were no police anywhere, because when you need them, they're never there. Come earn your buck and protect this distressed civilian, for it is their time to shine and prove that his taxes have not been wasted. At that moment, right in front of his eyes appeared the hooves of a monster that landed practically in front of him and tried to stop him. His name was Lyric, and he said that if the guy tried to run away again, he would turn him into a pool of blood. He then took him by the sweatshirt and lifted him a meter above the ground, saying he should have listened to him at first. And while the guy was trying to figure out what this monster wanted from him, the bull tossed him up dozens of feet at once. The boy was screaming and scared. He didn't understand what all this was happening to him today. The bull also looked in his direction and began to prepare for the fight by taking his hammer in his hands, squeezing it tightly and twisting it around his body. He looked very strong and intimidating. Hardly anyone could create competition for him, much less this little guy. He continued to growl and crouched on the ground to push off and fly higher. It turns out he also has some nice blue amps in his hooves. He then approached the guy, who also noticed a huge 3-meter bull flying at him, who in addition also swung his huge weapon, which is also several times larger for its size. It looks like the end is coming, because the hammer is almost near the guy's head, and surviving such a blow is really unreal. You know that? Suddenly, his eyes snapped shut and he was very shocked. But not from the blow, but from what began to happen next. It turned out that the blow with the hammer had been taken by the foot of the guy with blue hair who had been after our hero at the beginning and wanted to kill him as well. But now he decided to save him and threw the bull a dozen yards back, which he certainly could not have expected, and became much more aggressive from such, because he was not used to the fact that anyone could resist him. While he was trying to figure out what had just happened, his body rapidly hit the walls of the skyscraper. At that moment, the rescuer grabbed the guy by the hood and tossed him up, also wanting to hit him with all his might on the ground. Torin looked around and asked what would happen this time, while his savior grinned and pulled a comb out of his hands. Abel sure knows what he's talking about. I get it now. He immediately smiled and brushed his hair as he arrived here just in time for party. His eyes also lit up and turned red, and he complimented the boy, saying he had a great toy. But Torin was shocked. He didn't understand how he also knew he had a Scarlet's phone. It was impossible to believe. A hardcore fan? Wanna hand it over? No, I can't. It is Scarlet's, and it is probably expensive. Look, kid, I don't care. Just hand it over. At this point, a huge explosion formed behind them, while the guy with blue hair continued to threaten the guy. He was frightened and tried to cover his face with his hands, while his savior looked around. Smiling, he said that enough with the side quests, geez, and with all his might struck the bull that had just appeared near them. Go graze the fields, you dawn cow. I got shit to take care of right now. And Torin and the other people were watching the whole situation and were very surprised because the guy had only dealt with him with bare hands. Bull didn't want to just give up, so he got to his feet and got pissed off that the little shit was ruining his style. So he became very aggressive, saying that he will get rid of you, Liangshan trash, once and for all. A dialogue immediately began between them. They could not concede to each other in any way, so each tried to prove their advantage. Trash? You must have plowed your own brains out. Time to beat some sense into you. His anger mode kicked in, and he started to burn. The moment the guy was surprised that he had started it himself. The bull did not appreciate such a statement in his direction and tore the jewelry from his neck. It was obvious that he wanted to destroy the guy for such statements, and indeed, the jewelry flew right into his face as the guy with the blue hair dodged and started laughing, asking, "Is that really all he can do? Let him throw harder." At this point, from an overabundance of emotion and adventure, the guy started praying and promising that he would become a much better person. He started asking God to just send him home alive. The hammer blow immediately flew. "How dare you condescend plowing?" The bull added that farmers have an illustrious history of 10,000 years. They harmonize their blood, sweat, and tears with nature. He got angry and started waving his hands around, adding that he will pay for his insolence. That was primary revolution. The blue-haired guy started laughing and said that was exactly what he was talking about earlier, then activated the superpowers in his hands. He also created a weapon from his hand and began to wave it around, also forming yellow glares. At that moment, the bull jumped up and made the strongest possible blow with his hammer. Between them formed a big fight for life and death. The two monsters with superpowers decided to find out which one of them will be right. There was smoke all around, covering everything. The bull didn't understand what happened, because the blue-haired guy was holding something that looked like a blade, adding that all bark and no bite, just like the rest of you Jinmu runts. After that, he continued his attack and the confrontation continued. The bull immediately activated the blasters from his back, after which he immediately flew up. Their confrontation continued in the air, where the blue-haired boy was forced to go as well. So they were already fighting in the air. The bull did not appreciate such blows from his opponent, saying that it was such a cheap move. But no more, you scum. Everything was on fire, and a few seconds later, 4 red streaks ran down the blue-haired guy's body, leaving him very surprised and shocked. And then, a second later, when he realized what had happened, the bull tore him apart with his hammer, forming dark smoke all around him. But he managed to dodge and back away in time, even though the stripes were on his body. Immediately after that, he flew up into the air a dozen meters, which the bull absolutely did not expect. He pulled out his machine gun and told the piece of meat that he was here now. And now it was his turn for revenge, and the huge number of bullets he was trying to hide from flew at the bull. But for him, it was child's play. So he decided to show him what the Jinwo's Matto technology really tasted like. The guy was very amused by this and wondered if the bull could move after that. But he stopped him, because enough talk, it's time to move on to the second part. After that, bright flames began to glow from his splinters, which the bull clearly did not expect. With each second he received more damage to his side, and it seems that he was really in unbearable pain. At that moment, the result of the machine gun began to take effect, which made the guy with the blue hair not stop cheering and smiling. "What did I tell ya? You should have stuck to grass grazing." He pointed his machine gun at him again and added, "By the way, tell Talia and his 10 Celestials that I miss them," then pointed another charge in his direction. He was ready to finish the fight, but the bull was also pissed off, for how dare he disrespect the Grandmaster. They are the army of 12 will turn him to ash. Disrespect? I owe you worthless traitors nothing. Have some goddamn shame. The bullets from the machine gun flew in his direction and pierced the bull's entire body, which shook him senseless. After that, the guy stopped, blew on his gun, and said that finally the bull would pay for it all. Time over. It's time to hit the road. After these words, something unbelievable began. The bull began to tear apart. The red stripes were getting larger and larger. Suddenly, the bullets increased tenfold in size and covered the entire space, surrounding the bull, which he clearly did not expect. Well, the guy with the blue hair kept laughing at the situation and said he would see the bull next season.